Back with a Fox News alert. A new report from the Washington Post says that the U.S. delegation has now entered North Korea to prepare for that possible summit. Meanwhile, some in the media seemed too giddy a few days ago when the president called the meeting off. Watch.
What's Korean for whiplash? Dol Pyun. And from little rocket man to future peace partner to jilted ex to we'll see what happens. It's been Dol Pyun all the way.
The ultimate culture clash in an attempt at diplomacy.
There goes that Nobel Peace Prize. There you go.
All right. Well, here to debate whether that summit happens or not, has the media coverage been fair? We have got Trump 2020 campaign re-election senior advisor Katrina Pearson and Democratic strategist Christy Setzer. Good morning, ladies. Thank you both for being with us. I want to get right to it. Katrina, shouldn't everyone be pushing for success here? Shouldn't everyone want peace? This is not about Republican or Democrat or President Trump. This is about peace on the world stage. That's what we should all be fighting for.
Well, you're right, Abby. It should be. And, you know, I am very cautiously optimistic that the meeting is going to take place and that it may actually be successful. But I don't expect the media to take that common sense approach with anything regarding the Trump administration. There's obviously a bias, and they don't even try to hide it anymore. But how could they, Abby? They have just spent the last nearly a decade pushing propaganda for failed Obama/Clinton/Kerry policies. So in order to report fairly on anything that the president does would be to have them essentially eat crow. And they're not willing to do that. So instead, they'll just continue gaslighting the public.
All right, Christy, quickly, your reaction here.
Well, I would say that it has been a pillar of both Donald Trump's campaign and now his administration to get his supporters to hate on the press. Why? Because, as he recently told Leslie Stahl, because then when you guys write mean stuff about me or print negative stories, they're not going to believe you. Look, this has always been something that he's tried to do. He's tried to play with the truth and lie to the press back from his days when he was calling up the New York tabloids as, quote, John Barron and telling them, you know, this guy Donald Trump is really wealthy and really has quite a sex life. You know, look, I think the media are right to be feeling like they don't want to be played here. They don't want to be seen as pawns in Trump's game of this little reality show of will he, won't he actually get together with Kim Jong-un. And I feel that, you know, they should feel that way. They're here to do a job. It's a serious job. And, you know, they just want to be told the truth.
All right, Katrina, quickly, last word.
Look. The bottom line is, like I said, that's just gaslighting because it's not really their job to be taken or not taken. It's their job to report to the public what's actually happened. And the fact that we have reached a historic moment in United States history where a president could negotiate a peace treaty on the North Korea and South Korea peninsula, this is a historic opportunity, but the media is focusing all of the negatives and potential fallout.
No, and by the way, ladies, the summit has not, hold on, the summit has not even taken place yet, so we will see where this goes.
It may not.
The president's hopeful that it will, and I think we should all be hopeful that it will.
All of America should want that.
All right, Katrina, Christy, thank you, ladies, for being with us this morning. I'm sorry we have to cut the show.
.com. Next race is June 16th in New Jersey. Stand hope.
Got it. More in the after the show.
Meeting this week between the Justice Department and congressional leaders. Are we any closer to answers on potential spying on the Trump campaign? Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Trish Regan in for Maria Bartiromo today, and this is Sunday Morning Futures. Critics lashing out at our president after he holds an event on combating criminal, illegal immigrants. And two major stories breaking on the world stage for President Trump as he welcomes home another American held overseas. And new talks give new life to hopes for a historic summit between the U.S. and North Korea. Is it back on? House Foreign Affairs Committee member Lee Trump at the White House as a Utah native held for nearly 2 years in a Venezuelan prison returns to U.S. soil. 26-year-old Joshua Holt and his wife arriving last night, meeting with the president in the Oval Office. Holt thanking those who worked for his freedom, including Tennessee Senator Bob Corker, who after intense lobbying was able to hold a surprise meeting with Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro a day before Holt's release. The president calling the last 2 years a tough ordeal for the American missionary. Watch.
Josh Holt and his wife Tammy, and they came back from a very tough ordeal in a Venezuelan prison, almost 2 years, Josh. I just want to welcome you to the Oval Office, welcome you to the White House. It's really very special to have you both.
I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude for you guys, for everything that you've done, for the support of my wife through those 2 years. They were very, very, very difficult 2 years.
Let's bring in New York Congressman Lee Zeldin. He sits on the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. It's good to have you here. It's good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Happy Memorial Day weekend. Certainly a nice weekend for that missionary's family. That's a big deal. He was held in Venezuela for 2 years. Who does the congratulations go to?
First off, to Josh Holt and his family. Congratulations, welcome home. The timing couldn't possibly be any better for him. I'm sure that he would have rather have been 2 years ago, but he's here. For the whole state of Utah, you've seen how they've rallied behind Josh Holt for him to be here now with his wife. For our whole country, we get to celebrate again. We just had 3 Korean Americans return home from their captivity in North Korea. Now we have Josh Holt and his wife returning from Venezuela. And Americans feel good about it. But congratulations and thank you to the President, to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, the State Department, Senator Corker, the Utah congressional delegation. A lot of people worked really hard for this.
Yeah. What is Venezuela doing? Taking Americans. I mean, I've traveled to Venezuela many times reporting stories there, not during the Maduro regime, but back during Chavez's era. They're taking Americans? I mean, this guy's just down there trying to do his missionary work and he winds up in jail?
So you have all these other countries. They operate very differently than we do here in the U.S. And it is unfortunate that this happened. And fortunately, we've gotten to the point where Josh Holt's released. Venezuela is in a world of hurt. I mean, they just came off of an election that was not a democratic election. You have a presidency.
Maduro won again, by the way. Surprise, surprise.
The presidency actually is a dictatorship. Their economy is in ruins. There is really no voice of opposition that allows them to take over with their ideas to move their country in a better trajectory. So their nation doesn't really need to keep adding to that world of hurt by holding hostage and wrongfully imprisoning a United States citizen.
Okay, so speaking of all these sort of rogue nations or rogue regimes, if you would, this brings us, of course, to North Korea. And the big question is whether or not this summit is actually going to happen or not. Maybe it's back on. Here's the president speaking about North Korea. Watch.
We're doing very well in terms of the summit with North Korea. Looks like it's going along very well. As you know, there are meetings going on as we speak in a certain location, which I won't name, but you'd like the location. It's not so far away from here. And I think there's a lot of goodwill. I think people want to see if we can get the meeting and get something done. If we got that done and if we can be successful in the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
Congressman Zeldin, let me just ask you about why has this been so touch and go? I've gotten word that perhaps the Chinese had something to do with this. General Keane telling me recently that his sources, which are quite good, are telling him that the Chinese have begun trading with the North Koreans again, and that they are trying to bring the North Koreans back into the fold, and they don't like the idea of us having this summit. So are they really mucking things up enough that the summit might actually be off?
Well, it looks like if the answer, that question was being asked a few days ago, after the president made his announcement, and looked off.
Right.
Over the course of the last couple of days, it seems like North Korea's reaction has been one of saying, hey, listen, we want this summit to take place. They have sent signals that we're receiving overnight that they are in favor of a full denuclearization, according to the South Korean president. China played an important role in 2017. If you remember, in August, there was a unanimous UN Security Council resolution vote where even China and Russia voted. It was unanimous to effectively cut off over 1/3 North Korean exports. China played an important role in getting North Korea to the point where they wanted a summit and realized they needed a different trajectory for their country. But then we heard that the Chinese leader met with the North Korean leader, and then all of a sudden North Korea's rhetoric changed, their behavior changed, which led to President Trump deciding to walk away from the summit.
But now it's changed again. So why is it? Are they like figuring out maybe the Chinese aren't what we thought they were? Yeah, it's great that their language is changing again, but you know, when you go into a negotiation, you need to do so in good faith. And I think them sort of bailing on this, or seeming to bail on it, and ratcheting up their rhetoric, only to then get slapped down by us, and now they're coming back to the table. I mean, goodness, I mean, why can't they just, be an adult and have a normal negotiation process here?
I think
because it's North Korea.
I think North Korea watched the way the United States approached our negotiation with Iran.
Yeah.
And there's no similarities. This isn't Barack Obama as the President of the United States. This isn't John Kerry as the Secretary of State. Why is that important? In Iran, they were using rhetoric during the negotiations, illegally test firing intercontinental ballistic missiles, calling us the Great Satan, pledging death to America on their holidays, doing a lot of bad things. Their rhetoric was terrible. North Korea started doing that. And when North Korea did that, President Trump said, no summit.
Enough. Yeah, and that's the way it should be. That said, you know what really bugged me, and I know it bugged you because I heard you this week and I heard you talking about how, look, we need to remember that the president's success is all of our success as Americans. What bugged me was that many members of the left and many members of the mainstream media almost rejoiced, seriously, in the idea that the summit was off. Here's some of the Democrats on the withdrawal from the summit. Watch.
They were on a par with each other. He got global recognition and regard. He's the big winner. And when he got this letter from the president saying, okay, never mind, he must be having a giggle fit right there now in North Korea, in Pyongyang.
The art of diplomacy is a lot harder than the art of the deal.
A giggle fit, the art of diplomacy, a lot harder than... You know what? We know diplomacy is hard. The president knows diplomacy is hard. But why act like, I told you so, I told you so? I mean, isn't it good for the world? Isn't it good for our country? Isn't it good for the entire peninsula that this summit happened?
So Nancy Pelosi was wrong. Bob Menendez's point is well taken. The United States of America did not elect Nancy Pelosi president of the United States. It is a certain way of diplomacy or approaching foreign policy that led to this issue in the first place. It was a temporary shot that actually was proven false within days. Clearly, Kim Jong-un wants this summit. North Korea needs to pursue a different path for their nation. The current one's not working. Their country is in shambles. And if they take a step back and reflect on some of the words that they've used, and this is some people in Congress, some in the media, some all throughout our country, people who wake up in the morning, they're laying their hair on fire, taking whatever talking points they're being fed, as far as how are they supposed to oppose this president on everything and anything today. And if they reflect on what they say, there have been times where they root for North Korea against the United States. They have rooted for Hamas against the United States and our allies. When the market has a bad day, I've seen them celebrate. I told you so.
I told you
celebrating
so, right.
Our economy not doing
well. That is messed up because we are all Americans first. Before we are left, before we are right, before we are anything, we are Americans. Don't go anywhere, Congressman. Congressman Zeldin's going to stay right here because coming up, we're going to discuss President Trump's comments about the MS-13 gang, why critics are slamming the president on his rhetoric. Is it justified? You can follow us on Twitter at Sunday Futures. So stay with us here as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. We'll be right back.
MS-13 gang members and other criminals to infiltrate our communities. And Democrats in Congress refuse to close these loopholes.
This issue should transcend partisan politics. And unfortunately, it's not right now in Congress. They need to protect our constituents here. They need to protect their own. They need to work with you because you're putting your neck out there on the line. They need to do it as well, even if they're taking a tough vote for their constituents.
That's New York Congressman Lee Zeldin reacting to President Trump's speech last week in Bethpage, Long Island, on illegal immigration and the violent MS-13 gang. But critics are saying that the president is unfairly conflating the crimes committed by the ruthless gang, and I mean ruthless, with talking about animals, that he's referring to the gang members because he was talking about MS-13 and some of the horrible things that they have done. And, you're probably giving animals too much credit to call those people that do these horrible, we don't even need to go into it, but you know what I'm talking about. To do that, and then they're saying, well, no, he's referring to all immigrants when he says that. That seems like kind of a leap, right, if you would? I mean, taking things out of context. And I think this is partly why Americans are so frustrated with the media and so frustrated with those that are trying to pull him down. What do you think he meant, sir, with those comments?
That is a leap. That's a leap off the side of a cliff and falling on your face, because the California sheriff was clearly asking at the White House about MS-13. And the president directly, immediately responded to that comment, referring to them as animals. And then you have members of Congress and the media and others who are trying to conflate that to him, talking about all immigrants. I mean, they went big, they went broad. Now, what's important, you pointed out, calling them animals is a nice way of putting it. You could actually call them much worse. What's very interesting was, while we were at this roundtable, you had two sets of parents there, for childhood best friends who were murdered by MS-13. And the animals remark came up a few times in describing MS-13's behavior and their lack of humanity, their lack of character. The reaction from these parents are all the confirmation that the victims, their families, the people most impacted by MS-13, they're the ones who can absolutely validate that MS-13 are in fact made up of animals. We hear about the high-profile crimes. We had those two best friends. You had 4 people also just before that murdered with machetes in Central Islip ball field.
And ripping the hearts out and the horrendous gang rape. It's really bad, and this is an extremely violent group. I had one guest tell me, they make the mafia look, like Disney or something, because it is that bad. And they are extraordinarily ruthless, unlike anything we have ever seen historically. And so with that in mind, and also knowing, as some of the people there on that panel pointed out, that a lot of people are coming into this country as youths, and they haven't been properly vetted, and they're here illegally. And if you're trying to actually control crime in certain neighborhoods and throughout the U.S., if you're trying to control drug trafficking, why wouldn't you control your borders? Why would you allow people in and give them the potential to do this enormous harm and join a gang like MS-13?
The right policy would be better border security, better interior enforcement, ending catch and release, to end the visa lottery, to also with the UACs, the unaccompanied alien children, that program, we have these individuals who are set up for failure the entire time. The Obama administration actually was encouraging parents of these Central American countries to turn their kids over to these coyotes for this dangerous mission in the United States. The UACs, they end up coming to, by the way, some of them are held at gunpoint in order to be able to cross the border, have to do bad things, carry narcotics to get across the border. But then they come into communities where the gangs are targeting UACs for recruitment. So for that parent, the right thing for the United States to be doing, the right policy would be to tell that parent not to turn their kid over. The Trump administration recognizes that. The U.S. Attorney, the Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, other local levels of government, everyone realizes that there are flaws at UACs and other programs. We need to fix it. We want to fix it. We're up against some opposition, some obstructionism in Congress, but we have to fight through it, and we just need to shame these Democrats if they're not willing to do the right thing on their own.
All right, let me get to another hot topic right now, and that's whether or not there's going to be a second special counsel to look into what may have happened with the FBI, how on earth that FISA warrant was issued based on a dossier that nobody had bothered to even check and see who had financed it. You are calling for a second special counsel. I actually applaud that, because you know what? As a journalist, I want answers. As an American, I want answers. I think the world deserves answers. The United States of America, everybody who votes deserves an answer. Are you going to get it?
We have gotten a lot of transparency. What we see in this resolution, House Resolution 907, calling for a second special counsel, 25 original co-sponsors, it details a lot of facts with regards to misconduct at the highest levels of the DOJ and FBI with regards to FISA abuse, how and why the Hillary Clinton email probe ended, how and why the Trump-Russia probe began. And what's amazing, I was on there with you a few days back, and over the course of the last few days, in the entire country, no one has been able to poke a single hole in a single word of this resolution. So this is filled up with facts. Now, what's very telling is congressional Democrats and others don't want the American public to have more information. Congressional Republicans, the White House, others want the American public to have as much information as possible. so they can form their own independent judgment.
I mean, I think we deserve it. We need the information. There's still a lot of questions out there. No matter how it shakes out, if we get the information, and I get it, you got to redact certain things to protect certain people, but at least let people make their own conclusion.
The White House should declassify the FISA application. If you need to redact some of the sources and methods, that's fine. The fact is, as you read through this resolution, we now have a lot of answers. And now
we're getting there.
And now we need accountability.
Congressman, good to see you.
Great to see you as well.
Great to have you here
Good
today.
to be here.
Thank you. All right, the president continuing to call the Russia investigation a witch hunt on Twitter this morning as senior intelligence and law enforcement officials shared classified information about the probe with congressional leaders this past Thursday about the Russia investigation. President Trump claims a so-called government spy was placed in his campaign. One day after that meeting, the president tweeting, "Can anyone even imagine having spies placed in a competing campaign by the people and party in absolute power for the sole purpose of political advantage and gain? And to think that the party in question, even with the expenditure of far more money, lost!" Exclamation point. Now here's the other side. Democrat ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff. Watch.
Nothing we heard today has changed our view that there is no evidence to support any allegation that the FBI or any intelligence agency placed a spy in the Trump campaign or otherwise failed to follow appropriate procedures and protocols.
Joining me right now, Bud Cummins. He's a former U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Arkansas and partner at Avenue Strategies. Good to see you, Bud.
Good morning.
What do you think really happened here?
Well, you know, they're playing word games, and it's intended to be a distraction. And I think if you look at the overall landscape, there's a lot of concern among the Democrats and the left about the political implications of these latest revelations. They don't want to concede that a spy was put in the campaign. Okay, what about a confidential human resource paid to approach members of the campaign to try and elicit damning information? I mean, you can call it whatever you want, but they, during the course of an ongoing presidential campaign, the FBI targeted people in the campaign and went on a fishing expedition.
Okay, so what's the difference between a spy and an informant?
You got me. What's the difference between a murdering MS-13 gang member and an animal? You know, what's the difference between they eavesdropped on my campaign, whatever the president said, you know, they eavesdropped on me in Trump Tower. Well, they put taps on members of his team that talked to him. It's a word game.
So I guess the question then,
it's talking points is really what it is.
Were they doing this for political reasons, or were they doing this because they somehow thought there was a legit fear that the Russians had infiltrated the Trump campaign? The president says political reasons. I can't look into the souls of all the
decision makers, but it's gross incompetence. And at best, it was a bunch of career bureaucrats within DOJ and FBI trying to somehow get involved in something they absolutely had no understanding of, which is politics, and they completely gummed it up. That's
so why
the best
would they do
scenario.
that?
Well, they might have convinced themselves they were trying to do good, and they had some legitimate concern about Russian interference in elections. I mean, we can give them that, but now let's fast forward. And I ask you, what are they investigating now? What is the Mueller team? And I ascribe no misdeeds to Rosenstein or Mueller. What are they investigating? And in this polarized country, shouldn't you and I know that? I mean, you and I probably have 8 or 12 years of college between us, and we have no idea what they're doing.
They're allegedly investigating collusion. They want to know whether the Russians colluded with the Trump campaign. I mean, I think you and I have, and the rest of America right now has already seen that there is no evidence of collusion between Donald Trump and the Russians.
That's right.
But that's,
so what are we
that's what they're claiming that they could wrap it up shortly. I mean, I guess it's a question of whether or not the president's willing to sit down for an interview. Should he?
I don't think he should, because it's a trap, and until he and his team and the American public even know what crime they're investigating. You know, you've talked about a young man being released in Venezuela. You've talked about North Korea. Our justice system is supposed to be different than that. You know, there's a there's a DOJ motto. It's in Latin, and there's kind of a little mystery about it because apparently the people who understand Latin say it doesn't really mean anything. It's grammatically incorrect. So, but I'll tell you one thing it doesn't mean. Show me the man and we'll find you the crime. Right. That's a Russian. That's about as American as Russian caviar, and that's what we're doing right now.
So Lee Zeldin, Congressman Zeldin, was just here on set, and he's calling for a second special counsel. I've talked to some people who say that, look, they don't like special counsels, period, because they think it sends us down a dangerous path and a slippery slope. That said, I think what you're getting at is, you know, they've got this investigation going on. So far, they've come up with no collusion. But is there something else there? Is there a deep state at work that really wants to basically change the will of the American people? And if so, does that deserve a special counsel investigation?
Count me among the people that don't like the special counsel statute. Congress created the independent counsel. They tried to fix it here. It obviously doesn't work. They've allowed a special counsel to be launched like the bomber at the end of Dr. Strangelove on fraudulent pretense, and now they don't know how to recall it. It's just going. And so I don't like that. I think it's, in this case, it's the weaponization of politics. But the American people deserve the truth.
Yeah.
So whether it's through the independent, or through the OIG reports, or through a special a committee that Congress sets up for this purpose, to have hearings like in Iran-Contra and find out, but they need to do it soon, because the American people, there's so many important things going on, and nobody deserves to have this distraction where they're shouting questions at the president about Russia when we've got all these important things going on.
But before I let you go, I mean, isn't this exactly what Russia might have wanted? I mean, isn't this what Vladimir Putin wanted all along? I mean, this discord that we now have?
Of course it is. Their interests merged with the Democrat Party's interests, and they were able to con the country into going down this path, and we don't know how to stop it.
Yeah. All right, Bud Cummins, so good to see you. Thank you very much for all your insight. Be sure, everyone, you got to catch next Sunday's show, because Maria is going to be interviewing the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes. It's starting at 10 a.m. Eastern, right here on the Fox News Channel. You know, there's a chance that the summit with Kim Jong-un might actually still happen. Coming up, why analysts say North Korea may need a deal, as we at this hour for the president, happening on the world stage. First, Venezuelan prisoner Joshua Holt. He's back home in the USA. President Trump helping to secure his release after he spent 2 years behind bars in Venezuela. The president also making an announcement about the North Korean summit last night. The June 12th meeting, hey, it might be back on. The White House is reportedly sending a team to Singapore to prepare for potential talks with Kim Jong-un. All of this coming after a surprise meeting between Kim and South Korea's President Moon Jae-in yesterday. So here's what the president had to say about the release of Josh Holt and the possible June 12th summit. Watch.
We're looking at June 12th in Singapore. That hasn't changed. And it's moving along pretty well. So we'll see what happens. We've had 17 prisoners released during the Trump administration. You were a tough one, I have to tell you. That was a tough situation. But we've had 17 released, and we're very proud of that record. Very proud. And we have others coming.
Joining me right now, Gordon Chang. He's the author of Nuclear Showdown and the Coming Collapse of China. Boy, we've got a lot to talk about here today. But let me start actually with Venezuela and the significance of Josh Holt being back home in America right now. What does that tell you?
Well, this is the second time this month that President Trump has secured the release of Americans. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think the bad actors around the world have taken one look at this president and said he's really regained his footing, and now's not the time to mess with the United States of America.
So that's a big deal. I mean, everything that he's doing right now may be, in fact, a little bit calculated for that world stage, given that we've got these negotiations going on with North Korea. Do you think this summit's going to happen?
Yeah, I think so. The North Koreans need this summit. They need sanctions relief. They certainly don't want the United States to take out their nuke and their missile facilities. And Kim wants legitimization, of course, meeting President Trump. And also, he needs a counterweight to the Chinese. The United States has no territorial designs on the Korean Peninsula, and the Chinese, they've had a really rough relationship with the Koreans for 2 millennia. So I think Kim really wants to meet Trump. And we saw that on Thursday when, the president cancels the summit. And within hours, the North Koreans come out with this string of unusually conciliatory messages and saying, we even will go for the Trump formula on denuclearization. This is really quite stunning.
So why did they pull what they did? I mean, why did they have so many aggressive statements in the days before that led us to have to say, okay, guys, enough?
Well, I think there are a number of factors, but the most important one is that the Chinese were really starting to say to the Koreans, especially after that second summit on the 7th and 8th of this month, where Kim went to China 2 times in a row. I think the Chinese basically said, look, pull back. You don't have to deal with the Americans because we Chinese are going to support your economy. And we saw in the first 2 weeks of this month, the price of gas and diesel in the northern part of North Korea fell dramatically. And the only reason that could have happened is because the Chinese are pumping much more oil through the friendship pipeline.
And I also heard that the coal trade may have been resumed as well, where the North Koreans are able to send the Chinese coal. Well, in that case, they're in violation of the sanctions that they signed up to with us.
For about 3 months now, maybe 2.5, there's been really blatant Chinese sanctions busting. And it's a number of things. It's North Korean workers are now back in China. It's Chinese investment into North Korea. There's all those gifts that Xi Jinping gave to Kim at the end of March at their summit. That's a violation of UN sanctions. And the worst thing about this, Trish, is not only that the Chinese violated the sanctions by giving all those luxury items, they photographed it and they were saying, look, we're violating sanctions, U.S. What you going to do about it?
Yeah, well, we can do something. Believe me, we can do a whole lot about it. And don't forget, and I know you've talked about this a lot, and I appreciate this because you and I are simpatico on this one. We have economic leverage. So before we start, sending troops, we ought to be doing everything economically we possibly can with China to influence what they're doing with North Korea.
Yeah,
and by that I mean?
We hold all the high cards. For instance, we can, declare 4 of the biggest Chinese banks to be primary money laundering concerns. Used to be just Bank of China. Now there's evidence coming out that the 3 others of the big 4 have also been handling North Korea's money.
Bank of China, which, by the way, is in operation right down there. I mean, it's closed today because it's Sunday, but it's in operation right over there on
40th
Madison.
and 6th Avenue, 8 blocks from here. So we can do that. We also, we got ZTE, that Chinese embattled telecom manufacturer. It's got a death sentence right now from the Trump administration, and the Chinese need relief from that. There's all sorts of things.
But we're letting it exist, Gordon. I was a little surprised by that because it feels like a little mixed signal.
Yeah, and I wouldn't do that because, people are saying, well, look, the ZTE deal that the president has negotiated is a good one. But the point is, this is not an issue of whether it's a good deal or not for us or them. The point is the Chinese have made this an issue of political will by saying you have to give relief to ZTE. And so any deal, no deal, no matter how good, is a good deal. We need to show China that we have political will and that we will not allow them to mess with Iran sanctions, North Korea sanctions, you name it.
Okay, so maybe not trade so much. Or
not
maybe,
trade so much?
I mean, the whole trade thing is a whole other conversation because the idea that they're like, okay, we're going to knock our 25% tariffs down to 15% on cars.
That makes no difference.
Doesn't do it.
That tariff has to go down to what our tariff is on Chinese cars coming into the U.S.
2.5%. Or how about 0 for everyone? I take that.
0 for everyone.
All right, Gordon, it's good to see you. Thank you. There's a lot we can do and we should do, but it's going in the right direction.
Absolutely.
All right, good. Gordon Chang. Can progressive candidates winning in the Democratic parties carry the momentum over into midterms? We're going to debate that with our panel as we look ahead today right here on Sunday morning ahead of midterms. Last week, we saw several progressives winning Democratic primaries in many red states. Take Georgia's governor's race, where Democrat Stacey Abrams is now running for an office in a state that hasn't elected a Democrat for governor since 1998. But then in New York, Democrat Party heavyweights overwhelmingly getting behind incumbent Governor Andrew Cuomo over his progressive challenger, Cynthia Nixon. Here with me, Ed Rollins, Republican strategist and former campaign manager for the Reagan-Bush ticket, 1984, and Democratic strategist Jessica Tarlov. She's a senior director of research at Bustle.com. Both are Fox News contributors. It's good to see you both.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Ed, starting with you. Where are the weaknesses right now as you see it? What is the problem with the Democrats' message? That's a big question, but what is the problem with it, and will Republicans be successful as a result?
Well, it's 5 months to go. We don't know what's going to happen, and a lot can happen in the next couple of months. Here's what is happening. There's a lot of enthusiasm among particularly women candidates who are turning out. There's a lot of people on the Democratic side. There's a lot of people who basically thought, okay, we've got to go out and fight Trump. There's been some intensity in the voter turnout. Now, when that happens, sometimes the establishment types, and as you look across the line, just our side, your side, if you're an incumbent, sometimes you're not doing very well. There's a real anti-movement out there now. How does that establish? How does that get when you get to November and you've got two candidates? But I would say at this point in time, Democrats are struggling to find a message. The Nancy Pelosi message is not exactly what they're adhering to, and I think the reality is we are a party about Trump. He's the leader of our party, and so candidates on our side go out and say, I'm going to support the president's programs. That's much easier to get determined.
But it's one of the things that gets so challenging here, Jessica, the fact that some of the president's programs actually are very in line with historically what a lot of Democrats have wanted. And I look to Pennsylvania, for example, as
in
being
Ohio,
that.
Sherrod Brown, who backs the president's trade policies, Connor Lamb did in the Pennsylvania special election, where he took that seat. So there's a delicate line that Democrats have to walk, especially in the middle of the country. And we have 10 Democrat senators up for re-election in states that President Trump took by a lot. But I would say, pointing to the Georgia primary, for instance, Stacey Abrams won the support of Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. So that wasn't really about the division between the moderate wing and the progressive wing. And if you look at Amy McGrath, for instance, she was a fighter pilot. She has an amazing story. Yes, she has progressive values, but this isn't your typical Bernie Sanders candidate here. She talked a lot about national security. She talked a lot about patriotism, topics that Republicans have tried to co-opt and make their own. And I think that's really, when you look at the ads, and we've talked about this a lot before, you see a lot more Democrats featuring.
Others haven't gotten behind, say, like the Cynthia Nixon versus Andrew Cuomo. We all remember this quote from Madeleine Albright. I'm going to play it for you, and I want to get your reaction, Jessica. Here she is back in 2016 telling people why women should support Hillary Clinton.
Just remember, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help each other.